All right, so I have to say, Greta, that I feel like I have finally, after 42 years on this earth, I finally reached the limit of my IQ, apparently, because this Kanye West stuff has broken my brain. I I have been round and round. I mean, everybody knows that I don't, and you don't either. Neither of us are okay with the comments about Jewish people and Jewish control of the media, this or that, right? But I I don't want Kanye canceled, but also I am very sympathetic to these companies that say we cannot continue to have a representative of ours spewing anti-Semitic stuff. I feel like Kanye has stepped in some shit knowingly, and he may be mentally ill, but he doesn't have Tourette's syndrome, and he's not an idiot. And he knows that when you start saying the things that he's saying about the Jews, that you're going to get in big trouble. So I do not buy the idea that we should just give him a free pass because he's mentally ill. Emotional regulation. There's a lot of people who have problems with emotional dysregulation and controlling, perfectly controlling what they say. But he doesn't have Tourette's, and he knows that the stuff about the Jews, it's premeditated. He didn't just slip out once or twice. So he has gone on a kind of a premeditated campaign to say this stuff. I also sort of hate the idea that, someone who's successful and accomplished and brilliant and really intelligent, I think in some ways artistically, like Kanye, that we're just supposed to regard him as just some lunatic who's just like, oh, well, never mind, he's just raving at the mouth. To me, that's almost kind of like insulting. And so, but here's my question. Do you think it's possible that he is consciously or unconsciously running some kind of an experiment to see if by being really offensive, even by being as offensive as talking about Jewish people, that he can somehow break up cancel culture? And that, I guess what I'm saying is, do you think it's possible he's running some kind of like 4D chess for free speech activism here, forcing society to confront these things that you and I are having to confront now? Like, what do we mean by free speech and all that? Or you think that he's just, no, am I giving him too much credit?
I honestly think you are giving him too much credit. So he went on Piers Morgan, he went on the Lex Friedman podcast, and I was listening. I mean, I couldn't finish neither of those two interviews because it just hurts my brain to listen to him. But my point, though, is that I wholeheartedly support his right to say these things, as long as it doesn't incite violence directly against anyone, any specific group. And I don't think that tweet was that. I just don't know what he meant, so I wouldn't class it as that. So I'm very passionate about free speech. I think free speech should be absolute. And if someone only supports speech that they agree with, they're really not for free speech. To be for free speech, you have to stand up for people's right to say things that you passionately disagree with. Now, obviously, private enterprise, private business, and what they do is a completely different story. So Adidas and all the other companies that have dropped him have every right, obviously, not to be associated with him. And I understand that perfectly. If I was in their position, I probably wouldn't want to be that closely associated with someone like that or appear as though I endorse that person, because what do you endorse? With Kanye, I don't know. I guess people love him for his music, or originally they started to, but there's more to. I think he's a character. He's like a larger than life sort of person. So when you endorse as like a company like Adidas, a character like that, you are endorsing everything he comes with, which includes those crazy comments. So yeah, it is a difficult moral dilemma, but I think we're kind of on the same page about it. What do you think?
Yeah, so several things that you mentioned there, I want to dig further. I mean, I could talk about this for like hours because I've been, and this sounds kind of weird, but I've been going over this in my head like for almost 2 weeks, partly because I know that some of the Marilyn Manson fans are a little peeved at me for critiquing Kanye, which is fine. And but I've been like really like asking myself, look, I've been promoting free speech since I started my channel. I say things all the time that I wouldn't want to be, fired for, or if I were representing a brand or had sponsors, I would want them to stick by me. But the anti-Jewish comments, anti-Semitic remarks, let's just take out the morality of it even at the moment. It's just something that society has agreed on for a long time. Almost everyone has agreed on for a long time, you know, that leave the Jews alone, right? And I made a point that if Justin Bieber were going around saying offensive stuff about Black people, that he would be dropped very quickly. Of course, then someone on Twitter said, well, what if somebody was going around saying something bad about white people or men or Christians? You know, people wouldn't, they wouldn't get dropped for that. And yeah, that's an unfortunate double standard, because the standard should be the same. But really, like, going after the Jews, it's not acceptable. Now, we both agree where it gets thorny, like you said, is this issue of sponsorships.
But
These are,
can I
oh,
just
go
push
ahead,
back for a
please.
moment? What do you mean when you say it's not acceptable?
Oh, well, I mean, it's, I don't think that it is, I don't think that it is something that I can hear without speaking out against it. So I guess that's what I mean. It's not tenable for me to just be silent. And I understand, you know, that Kanye, and tell me what you think about this. I understand that Kanye stood up for Marilyn Manson, someone who I believe is innocent and the victim of a hoax that I've been defending. And I really respect that. And I understand that there's a certain loyalty on Marilyn Manson's part that comes along with that. And if I were Manson, I would not speak out against Kanye. I would keep my mouth shut. I would lay low. So I'm not expecting that Manson should say or do anything. But me personally, it's just a line that Kanye's crossed, and I just can no longer not say anything. But for these, so what do you think, first of all, about that? Do you think that, like, we Manson supporters owe him, Kanye, kind of loyalty to be quiet, or what's your thought on that whole thing?
I don't think we owe him loyalty per se, but it's, I mean, we can compartmentalize a human being when it comes to these things. So he can be on the right side of one story and then be terribly wrong, or his whole worldview might be terribly flawed, but then he could occasionally get something right. So it's not an all or nothing sort of thing. So we can almost praise him, I guess, for embracing Manson and publicly supporting him, at the same time condemn his anti-Semitic comments. It's just, I think it's possible to do those two things simultaneously.
Yeah, and I just want to say too that you know, and I said this on Twitter today, Marilyn Manson's gratitude is not an endless or bottomless account. In other words, like, just because Kanye did those wonderful things that he did, having Manson, inviting Manson to his concert, standing up with him and all that, you know, I wonder if Kanye had told Manson before they did these concerts together, if he had told him, hey man, I'm going to stand up for you and we're going to do these concerts, but also I'm going to go on a major media campaign against the Jewish people. Manson might have had some second thoughts about that. So I feel like Kanye has stepped in some shit knowingly.
There's no methodological thinking behind what he did, what he has done. He would not have announced it to Manson or to anyone that he was going to do this, because I don't think it's something that he's been planning to do.
Oh, no. I didn't mean it like that he should have. I'm just saying that to people who are saying, well, look at everything that he's done for Manson. Manson should support him in return. I'm just saying that I think if Manson had known where this stuff would end up leading, what would you do if you were Adidas, or you were one of Balenciaga or whatever, one of his sponsors? I mean, I know they've canceled him now, dropped him, but like, personally, if you were, like, say you were the CEO and it was all in your hands, do you know what you'd do?
Well, if it was a mainstream brand like Adidas, or a fashion, like any kind of mainstream fashion brand, I would drop him. There's no question about it. Yeah, it is kind of like, people debate this a lot with regards to Twitter, because Twitter is a private company, you know, whether Twitter should have the right to block people like presidents, you know, and that it does strike me as a private company having way too much power in that case.
Right.
But it's different. I think Adidas and Twitter are very different stories, because Twitter is really a borderline public service. so their platform is just so significant.
They're not just selling
like daily
sneakers. Yeah.
politics.
Yeah.
Like very important public figures make announcements there first. So to shut someone out from there, you're actually taking away a huge platform. You're kind of depriving millions and millions of people from having access to the information, to important announcements, things like that. It's just, I don't think there's any comparison between Adidas dropping someone and Twitter banning people. So how about you? How would you answer that question?
You know, like I said the other day on one of my shows, you know, free speech is a spectrum. And on one hand, we have the idea of absolute free speech, where you would say whatever you wanted and there'd be no consequences of any kind, legal, but non-legal, sponsors, whatever, right? And then all the way on the other side, we've got the idea of like no free speech, where like the government censors you. Obviously, I want to have as much free speech as possible, but I just don't see, I don't see how these brands could keep him having said the stuff he says. Now, is it a good business decision? That's interesting, because I saw that the Financial Times magazine estimated that by cutting Kanye West loose, Adidas is going to lose like hundreds of millions of dollars. So it may turn out actually that the better business decision would be to weather this out. And I think that's what Adidas was trying to do, was to weather the storm. It dies down. And I'm sure they've been pleading with Kanye to apologize. And actually, like, I don't want Kanye to apologize or to recant if he doesn't feel that way. Like, I do respect someone who, if they have convictions, even if they're offensive, they stand by them. My problem with Kanye, though, and I would say this to Kanye, is I don't think you've thought things out. I don't think you've done your research. I think you're pissed at some people and you're just blowing off, you know, steam and trying to be outrageous and stuff. So to me, like, it would be best for him to change or to recant this. But I don't like the fact that he's being bullied into it either. I mean, you know, I don't want anybody to be forced to recant or because of a struggle session or whatever, you know.
I mean, if what he said was merely offensive, then I'd see that Adidas and other brands might be more willing to keep him on. Or if it was like a throwaway comment, if he was talking in an interview about something completely unrelated, that he just made a random comment about certain groups of people being overrepresented in certain industries at the top, whatever, something like that, then you could dismiss that as just a slip of the tongue almost. But this is obviously something he's been doubling down on deliberately. So it definitely is a large part of his worldview, and that's it goes beyond being offensive, because it is, I mean, it's, to begin with, it's factually inaccurate, because I just don't believe Jewish people really have that much power in the music industry. But it's true that some groups of people are overrepresented in certain industries. We have that, and that is generally because they're the best people for the job, and they just tend to have like certain talents. You know, you don't have to look for malicious.
There's a lot of there's a lot of factors, complex factors that go into these things, you know, as you know, and you know, and what you said is true about it's not factually accurate. You know, he's complaining about JP Morgan Bank, you know, saying, well, Jamie Dimon's not Jewish, and he's complaining about these different industries where there are a lot of non-Jewish. I mean, it's just, it's not factually accurate. And I understand that some people have issues with the Anti-Defamation League. I have some people on Twitter telling me that it's basically a Marxist organization, that it's basically the equivalent of like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which I think very little of and stuff. So I'm not saying that I line up with all the people who are criticizing Kanye or whatever. I'm just saying that I do think that there's a line that's been crossed that I have to speak out against. I don't think that it's doing Marilyn Manson any favors for his supporters to stay silent. So I want people, you know, that's one reason I'm speaking out, is I'm actually speaking out partly because of Marilyn Manson. Not that I've had any communication with him, but I mean, for myself, I want people to know that one of the main people who's been defending Marilyn Manson and believes that he's innocent also is not okay with these Kanye comments. So I understand that it is legitimate, or I believe that it is legitimate to criticize Israel. I mean, as a country. I'm not saying that I share those criticisms. I'm not smart enough to figure out the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I've read about it. That's another one that breaks my brain. Yeah, no, we're not. But what I want to say is I do understand that there's a difference between criticizing Jewish people and criticizing the state of Israel or Zionism. but that's not what Kanye is doing. Okay. So if Kanye were to come out and say, you know, Israel is oppressing the Palestinians, or Israel's, their policy is too warlike, or blah, 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 that's one thing, but that's not what he's doing. So we just want to be clear on that, because I've had a number of people on Twitter saying, well, there are things to criticize Israel for, to criticize Zionism for, and that's not what we're talking about.
No. Yeah, people read a lot into it. Like I'm aware of people pointing out what you mentioned about the Anti-Defamation League, but they're just reading way too much into what he's saying, giving him way too much of a benefit of a doubt. I can't do that, because if that's what he means, that's what he should say.
Right.
And that's not what he's saying.
So does it worry you? Does it worry you though, the slippery slope where, you know, we're in danger of getting into almost a social credit system where you're going to have, where you can't express a conservative opinion? Like, you know, I have unpopular opinions about the COVID vaccines, not conspiracies or whatever, but I'm against mandatory vaccination. I'm also against a lot of what we did, shut down our country and economy and whatever for the COVID stuff. That is an opinion that is very negatively regarded by the big media outlets and by the mainstream and stuff. So, you know, if I had sponsors, what if they dropped me for that, right? It's such a slippery slope.
I know. Yeah. So I think